It's my lucky day. It's my lucky day. It's my lucky day. My lucky day. Don't need a pot of gold.
Good morning, everybody. Today is September 2nd. September 2nd. Some of you are going into fall. We down here in the southern hemisphere of the planet are going into spring. So if you hear birds going outside, it's because I live in the middle of a forest. Anyway, hi, welcome. Today's September 2nd. I want to welcome you to episode 33 of Coffee and Cloud Native. My name is Adrian Goins, and every night I and my army of bots scour the internet for news and content related to Kubernetes and Cloud Native, and every day you'll find me here to share the bits that I find interesting. This is a curated list of content. I go through around 200 submissions every night, and I just select a handful of them for the next day's show. These are the tools and the products and the things and the companies and the whatever that I would use, that I'd like to use, that I do use, that I find interesting. And I just want to share them with you so that, because I think they're pretty cool. If you are watching now or in the future, please click the thumbs up button on the video so the YouTube algorithm shares it with other people. I stopped saying that a few days ago and I started putting up that little, whatever that thing is that shows up over here. And I noticed that we get 4 likes on the show. So either you guys stopped liking the show, or if I don't say it, people don't remember. Anyway, so I have to say it now. Remember, also, we are having a giveaway on Friday. If we get 50 people watching the stream live, I will give away Brett Fisher's Kubernetes Mastery course to one of the people who are in the chat. I hope we can get 50 people. We've been getting between 30 and 40. 50 doesn't seem like a stretch, right? Tell your friends. Retweet my stuff on Twitter. I don't know. Let's try and get 50 people in here. And then, of course, if we can keep 50 people, I'll do this again next week. I'll do it the week after. And I'll start giving away other courses because I want everybody to learn more and to feel confident with the skills that we're developing. So, also, speaking of the chat, who do we have today? We have lots of people. We have Chris. Good morning. Peter. Marcel. Nuno. Good morning. Wojtek from Poland. Cześć, Wojtek. And Marcel's laughing at me about my my Apple. I have a 27-inch Thunderbolt display that it's a few years old. I mean, Thunderbolt display. Come on, it's Thunderbolt 2. But it's beautiful. Other than the fact that randomly, about once a month, it'll just turn off. And it doesn't have a power switch or anything like that. I have to disconnect it from not only power, but from video. And then wait 30 seconds for the capacitors to drain. And then I plug it back in and then it wakes back up and it's fine for another month. It was really expensive. So until the actual display stops working, I'm going to keep using it. Anyway, he's laughing at me because all this technology and we're still left with I don't know, reboot it. And Apple's trying to say buy a new one, except they don't have Thunderbolt displays anymore. They've got that $5,000 perfect color cinema display that goes with the Mac Pro that costs $10,000. I'm not going to do that. Who else do we have? We got Justin and Tej. Good evening, Tej. All right, so it's great to have you all here. Let's get started. Oh, I can't show you that yet. We got to start over here. Rancher has a new release. This is fun. Rancher has a new release, 2.4.7, which is exactly the same as 2.4.6, except it has a higher number. There was a bug that was introduced in 2.4.6 that's kind of a little nasty. Well, it's not nasty, but new tokens that were created had a default life of 24 hours because of some other feature that they introduced. So that was an accident. Oops, we're really sorry. If you upgraded to 2.4.6, upgrade to 2.4.7. And this is why Rancher has... Okay, so this is also the latest stable. Rancher goes out of their way to identify latest and stable. If you're running anything in production, always run stable. And you can pull the stable tag or the stable Helm repo to make sure that that's always the case. New releases go out as latest. Test them in your lab, test them. They might have bugs, but after they cook for a little while and there's no bugs left, then they get promoted to stable. So 2.4.7, roll that out. Yesterday I went on a bit of a rant about Docker, and that continued on Twitter where I posted my first ever Twitter thread because I realized after the show ended that there were some other things that I wanted to say or that I realized about just how particularly Oh, there's words we can't say on the channel because this is a nice channel. inappropriate what Docker's doing, or the perhaps unintended consequences of what they're trying to do. And one of the ones I realized is that if you have a large Kubernetes cluster and you're in the middle of doing a rollout and you hit one of their limits, they're just going to shut you down for the next hour. So you might end up with an inconsistent cluster state for an hour because of something that's within your control, but also somewhat outside of your control. Everything that they're doing, I understand. They're trying to get you to pay for the stuff. They pay money for it. I get it. I don't know that there's a better way that they could do it. So I think it's going to be one of those situations where we got to vote with our feet. So we have to do what we have to do to protect ourselves, our infrastructure, our companies, our operations, our everything. We can't just assume that the things outside of us are going to be there forever. So one of the available options in the new pricing plan is you can have 100 pulls an hour if you're pulling anonymously, or you can have 200 pulls an hour if you are authenticating. Authenticating simply means that you have to put an image pull secret onto every single thing that you're pulling, even if it's just pulling from public images in Docker Hub. And that can lead to extra work for yourself. So Michael pointed me at this tool. Now, granted, this is an article from 2019, but they are... Let's go to their actual GitHub repo. They are still updating this. 0.12 was released 19 days ago, so this is still actively being developed. And what this does is runs on a timer loop. It runs every 10 seconds, which I think is a little bit aggressive. But when you create a namespace, it will automatically copy image pull secret credentials to the default service account for that namespace. So this means if you have a Kubernetes cluster and you have lots of namespaces, as soon as you create one, boom, everything in that namespace will now pull as an authenticated pull from Docker Hub. And you don't have to do anything else. You don't have to configure it directly in your deployments, on your pods, on your anythings. This immediately gets you from 100 pulls an hour to 200 pulls an hour, and so you should probably just roll this out. And then continue to keep an eye on your actual load. I don't know if Docker's going to give us a dashboard or any kind of warning or anything that you can pull with monitoring. I hope that they do, because if they just don't say anything and then pull the plug, we can't say what they are on the show, because it's a nice show where we're not allowed to say things about people that are not, well, whatever. Anyway, protect yourself. What do we got here? Yesterday, also in the show, we talked about the HAProxy Ingress Controller, and somebody who, I didn't go back to the chat to see who asked the question, but I remember the question came up about, does this support drain? And yes, it does. Not only does it support drain, that's funny, this didn't actually take me directly to the link. There we go, drain support. Not only does it support drain, but I also found out that the Nginx Ingress Controller, unless they've fixed this, but I looked around for a little while yesterday, and this is from 2018, there's some follow-up questions about it that seem to indicate that drain support in the Nginx Ingress Controller is a paid feature. Now, do you actually need drain support? There are situations where you might. Let's go back to the HAProxy tab, because they're the good guys in this conversation. Drain is important when you don't have pod lifecycle configuration or when you have persistent sessions. And they even say that here in this doc. It's particularly important when you have persistent sessions. Drain will migrate sessions. So if you use it in conjunction with pod lifecycle stuff where when you're doing a rollout, you don't kill off the old pods for some extended period of time so that you're not cutting connections abruptly or ending up with lost connections. Combined with drain support, we'll move everything off to the new environment and then just make sure that that's actually happened by pulling HAProxy, and when it does, kill the other pods. So yes, drain support in the HAProxy Ingress Controller. I started creating a list of bake-off topics. Not that I have any time to actually create additional content, but coming out of this show, there's so much content that I would just love to make. So I think an opportunity to have a bake-off between the HAProxy Ingress Controller and the Nginx Ingress Controller would be really cool, along with other stuff like OKD against Rancher, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago, or OKD against RKE, or OKD against K3S. If you have any other cool things that would be great for like a cage fight, let me know on Twitter or in the chat or whatever, and I'll put them on the list. And someday, when I have copious amounts of time, when I'm kicking back on a beach, and yeah, that's never going to happen. But I will put them in the list and at least look at them often and feel guilty for not making the content. Da, da, da. All right, Nuno's gonna go Shanghai people and bring them to the stream. My grandfather. Oh, Adrian tells us a story. My grandfather in World War II. So his family was from Germany. My family comes from Germany on my mom's side. So he was Gerhard Karl Fleischer, and he was known as Shanghai Fleischer. He was in the submarine service in World War II. And he would apparently Shanghai people. So he would, they'd go ashore, they'd go to the bar, they'd meet some nice young man there, and they would get him drunk, and he would wake up in the United States Navy. Welcome, son. So yeah, go out, get people drunk, bring them to the show. Or maybe don't do that. Good afternoon, Frank from Germany. And Tim. Hey. Nice to see you, Tim, also from Germany. Okay, what do we have next? We have... Oh, yeah! All right, Suraj was on the show. Well, Suraj wasn't on the show, but Suraj's content was on the show recently. And scrolling down my notes here. Yes, right. So he was on an episode 12. Which was, we talked about how to backup and restore Prometheus. He's back now with a new article on how to gracefully kill Kubernetes jobs that have a sidecar. Why would you have a sidecar in a job? Service mesh. Okay, so the scenario that he describes is the job completes, but the sidecar is stuck. And his solution is pretty innovative. His solution, oh, totally lost my mouse. There it is. One of the best things that Apple has is the ability to like swipe your trackpad really fast, and the mouse gets big on the screen. It's kind of cool. So his solution is that your primary container needs to kill the sidecar container. So in order for this to work, you need to have share process namespace in the configuration so that the containers are all sharing the same process namespace. And then that allows you to run a pkill job against the process that's running in the sidecar. If you do this, you want to be careful that whatever the sidecar process is actually handles signals correctly. A lot of processes don't. So if you should just test it. That's how you're going to find out. You don't want to end up with zombie processes on your host. Zombie processes, generally, you get rid of those by killing init, and killing init kills your host. How many of us have ever, what happens if I kill PID1? Cool stuff. So if you are running something that doesn't handle signals properly, then you can run an init process like dumb init or whatever that little micro init thing is that Docker has, and it will handle killing child processes. So this is cool. Thank you, Suraj, for another fantastic article. OneInfra. Oh, let's talk about these guys. OneInfra, they basically want to give you Kubernetes as a service. All right, well, I don't fully understand this. On the one hand, it just kind of looks like the Kubernetes dashboard. Let me go to their site. I think their site has nothing. Yeah, these are the ones where their website is basically a big screen with an animation. So that's not helpful. But if we scroll down here, they have some really tiny images that you probably can't see on the screen. But basically, it looks like Kubernetes dashboard with multi-cluster support. So I'm like, it's been done. But in the documentation, he talks about some things like deploying workers, enabling VPNs, workers existing in remote locations separate from the control plane nodes, and joining clusters from behind several layers of NAT. He talks about hypervisors, but not in the sense of like, oh, fire up a virtual machine somewhere. And like, he talks about hypervisors. But the documentation isn't really clear enough for me to figure out what it is this actually does. It's going to require further investigation. And I think that it somehow allows you to create distributed Kubernetes clusters with glue for them to work, or possibly virtual Kubernetes clusters or nested Kubernetes clusters. I wanted it on the show because it's either going to be really, really cool or not. And I want to know if anybody uses it, who can tell us, a use case for it and your experiences with it. Probably when I tweet this out later, I will get the creator of this, Rafael Fernandez Lopez, to respond and be like, yeah, this is totally what it's for. This is another one of those things where if I had more time, I would just roll this out. Also, if I had more infrastructure, I would roll this out and kick the tires and see what it actually does. The VPN edge remote worker nodes auto join thing just sounds like it's solving a specific issue. So this is OneInfra. We'll probably have them back on the show later once we figure out what the heck it does. Constraint. Wow, we might actually end the show early today. I'm kind of burning through all of the topics that I had for today. So let's jump back over to the chat here and slow it down. You ever see Dark City? Shut it down. No? Am I too old? Peter says, a local registry bake-off would also be cool, like Harbor versus Docker registry. I do need to get Harbor back out. I tested Harbor when it first came out, and I was like, boring. But as somebody said in the chat yesterday, and I agree, they're doing a lot of really cool stuff to make it a competitive product and a product with a considerable amount of value. So Harbor versus other registry tools, I think would be good. And we could also throw Nexus in there and Artifactory. I run a Nexus system here at Sonatype Nexus here in the house as a pull-through cache. And since pull-through caching is something that we're all going to have to be looking at for this Docker Hub nonsense, I can personally recommend Sonatype Nexus, their open source one, because I'm cheap and I'm not going to pay for stuff because it's just me. But their paid features are also very good. And then JFrog has Artifactory, which I think their pull-through cache functionality is paid, but I'm not 100% on that. And then all these have other extensions. So it'd be great if I could even get these vendors to be like, here's a license for the product so that I can actually look at the real enterprise class features and give you guys some estimations on them. It's hard to just guess what the paid features are good for. And honestly, like for an individual, I'm not paying for those. Nuno and Justin are talking about hats. I'm like reading this. I'm like, I wear mine while driving, and I'm often given right of way, even though I drive. That's cool. I wonder if control planes will become trivial like cloud SaaS. That's a question from Justin. Maybe. I mean, the control plane is something that imagine we were doing this with PCs or desktop computers. Imagine that when desktop computers first came out, you had to understand what the CPU did. And you had to understand its relationship with the RAM and how it signaled what was back in the day, the ISA bus? ISA, right? Yeah. So the ISA bus or the IDE bus to talk to your drives or whatever came before that, SCSI. Lots of people just wouldn't care, and that would be a barrier to adoption. I see Kubernetes as kind of the same thing. Like the control plane is important, and you've got people like us who care, but you have a lot of people who just want to use it, which is why hosted Kubernetes solutions are as popular as they are. I would not be surprised if we get, in 5, 6, 10 years to a place where the Kubernetes control plane is just so rock solid that it just behaves like the CPU in your system. And maybe we'll even get to where we have Kubernetes embedded in hardware, and you could do, you can flash it to Kubernetes 6.45 or whatever the versions are by then. I mean, why not? If they're talking about putting Kubernetes in fighter jets and smart cars and wind farms and refrigerators and all of these other places, as we get 5G rolling out with just ridiculous amounts of bandwidth for us to communicate with one another, I mean, really, there's nothing we can't do. Take anything and model it in software. You ever read the book Daemon or Freedom, the sequel to it? Great books. They have so much micro technology in there that they have like glasses that are AR, and they can actually, they're tapped into information about other people. So everybody that they look at has like a call out box above their head that says who they are. And then there's a point system for what, whether they're like neutral or positive or negative. And all of society has been gamified based on the presence of technology in the world around us. Demon is one of those books that you will start reading it, and inside of 50 pages, you will not be able to put it down. You will read it. You will skip sleep. You will skip work. You will skip eating. You will skip Netflix. It's just candy, but it's so good. Freedom's also good. All right, GitLab Registry 2. Okay. Just skimming through the chat here. All right, so people are, GitLab Auto DevOps does scanning too. Okay, I'm gonna go back through the chat after this, and I'll make some notes, because I watched the stream yesterday where I was like, writing on my paper for 15 seconds. Nobody wants to look at the top of my head. Okay, good. So you guys are having some good conversation about registry tools, and I'll start bringing some of those on the chat or on the stream and talking about them as well. Next up. This is an article from VMware. Some of you might be surprised that I have an article from VMware on the show. I don't actually dislike VMware, and I don't dislike anybody who works at VMware. The video that some of you saw that I made about VMware last year objected to some specific ways about how they presented themselves when they entered the party that all of us were already at. But VMware as a company has lots of smart people who work there, and they have a clear vision, and more importantly, they have the financial power to direct the market. They do a lot of really good things. This article is pretty cool. So they're talking about SLA versus SLO versus SLI. They have a nice little graphic down here. So SLA, we all know about that, right? You contract for service and you get a service level agreement from your provider that says that they will give you X amount of uptime or bandwidth or whatever. And that's a guarantee of service quality. And if they fall below that, then you've probably also had experience with reaching out to them and being like, hey, you violated the SLA. And they're like, okay, here's 14 cents of credit, because that's really all that the contract says we have to give you. And then you realize that your SLA is kind of a wasted piece of paper. However, without an SLA, they would give you 0 and tell you to just take it. But then there's SLO and there's SLI. SLO is your service level objective, and that's your goal for reliability. And SLI is service level indicator. I don't remember what the I stands for, but it's basically where you are right now. I ran a managed services provider for 14 years, and we had SLAs with our clients related to uptime of the services that we were managing, and we strove for high reliability. But what I liked about this article is they point out, and I can attest to this as well, that the closer you get to 100% reliability, the more expensive it is for a significant drop-off in progress. So basically the cost to get from 95 to 96% reliability is like 100 times more than the cost to get from 94% to 95% or something like that. To get from 96 to 97, it's like 100 times more. And I know that. But they introduced something I liked, which is basically not only is it more expensive for less return, but fewer people are likely to notice the difference between 95 and 96, and more importantly, even fewer people are likely to care. So this doesn't mean don't strive for reliability. It means consider the cost of doing so, and if you can apply a financial value to it, then spend that money on development. Spend that money on making possibly breaking changes as long as you are above your SLO. Monitor it. And so let's say that you have a 95% SLO for the month, and you're at 96% or you're at 98% or whatever. As you tick down closer to that, you spend less money and energy on development and more money and energy on maintaining the service. And it's entirely possible that you can get much faster progress in the development of your application with the money that you would have otherwise spent to not get very much increase in reliability. I wish somebody had told me that when I was running a company, because I think that that is really, really smart advice. Customers can't see, more importantly, customers don't care until you cross that threshold where they do. I'll have this in the show notes. It's short and it's a good read. I'll save this for another day. This is a slide deck about how CERN uses Kubernetes, and I have a call out for a bunch of slides from here that I want to talk about just because, wow. So we'll punt this to tomorrow because we're at the top of the hour, which means we just have time for Tool of the Day. What kind of song would the Tool of the Day jingle be? Somebody recommended that Tenacious D should do it. So does it make it like rock and roll? Is it like a metal thing? You know, what would the Tool of the Day jingle sound like if it was Lady Gaga or Depeche Mode or... I can't think of anybody else. I don't know. I'm not going to try and sing any of those either. Can you imagine me trying to sing how Lady Gaga would do Tool of the Day? You'll never see that. Today's Tool of the Day is a gift from our friends at Weave. The Kubernetes reboot daemon monitors your nodes and detects a reboot sentinel, and then it systematically cordons, drains, and reboots nodes from within Kubernetes. Reboot sentinel, so that's like a file. And I didn't even realize that package management systems will actually put this out there. Whoops. Am I logged into something yet? I'm not. Let's see. Who might need to be... Training-us. That's who it was. So, I'm terrible about rebooting nodes that are actually doing things. And you can see here that this node says system restart required because it's running Ubuntu 18 and it automatically went out and did some updates before I turned that off because it was sucking up all of my bandwidth. Well, sure enough, there is a reboot required flag sitting there. So if I were running kured, or kured, it's probably kured. Anyway, the Kubernetes reboot daemon, if I was running that, then I could have my nodes automatically update, and when a reboot was required, it sets a lock so that it only reboots one node at a time, and to make sure that that node comes back up before it does that. It will defer reboots if there are Prometheus alerts for the nodes, or if there are certain expensive pods, expensive in however you want to define that, but things that shouldn't just be killed or moved or whatever. You can set a reboot window, so it'll only actually perform the reboots during an approved maintenance window, and has a bunch of other cool features. And then since it's automatic and it uses locks, they even have troubleshooting on how to disable it, how to handle if a node doesn't come back or if a lock gets stuck so that you can continue the process. It's a really nifty tool. They released 1.5.0 yesterday, where they added the annotation TTL for automatic unlock. So this they have manual troubleshooting, but then you can also tell it that if 30 minutes goes by and the lock is still there, it'll actually remove it and then continue with what it's doing. They also moved the Helm chart out from the Helm stable repo because all of that's going away, and some other minor stuff. Check this out. This is something that I definitely will be rolling out because as I get more and more Kubernetes nodes and systems and stuff under my control, it's completely inappropriate for me to neglect updates because I don't want to reboot, or reboots because I updated. You saw that one was from July. Come on, how terrible am I? That's actually my training server. It gets snapshotted and rolled back all the time. But still, there's no reason. Like, it's easy to defer these things because they take time and because we're just all so busy. So this kind of automation that's done intelligently and in a way that protects us from all of the stuff that we're scared of is amazing. What's not to love? Devin says, my home lab nodes are currently pending reboot from Kured. Very nice. All right, so that's it for today. If you liked what you saw, please wait while my teleprompter starts working. If you liked what you saw today, what do I have to say? Give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. I'm here every weekday, and there's always something new to talk about. I will have all of the links to the stuff up in the video description in about a half an hour, and if you follow me on Twitter, you'll get a notification when that happens. If you have something that you would like me to consider for the show, please hit me up and let me know. My contact details are in the video description, or you can tweet with the CNCN hashtag, and I will pick it up. And of course, if I mentioned a tool that you use, tell me in the comments. I love hearing about people's experiences with all of these things. Remember, giveaway on Friday. Tell your friends. Let's try and get more people on the show, in the show, talking about stuff. Let's elevate and raise the community so that all of us can do more with less, and maybe we can recover some of that time that we all say that we never have, and then we can spend it on doing more. Come on. So, like I said, I'll be here every weekday. There's always something to talk about. Come hang out with us. Otherwise, thanks for joining. I'll see you in the next show. Bye.